Welcome to International Trade Minute, Quick Fire Trade News, the essential podcast for today's trade professionals, presented to you by Rydell Law Firm. If you're a seasoned practitioner, this is where you'll find your weekly distilled briefing on the pulse of international commerce and regulation. We bring you the latest legal and trade news, distilled into straightforward, bite-sized updates for busy trade professionals. Sponsored by Rydell Law Firm, this podcast is crafted by expert trade attorneys to keep you ahead of the curve with concise, actionable insights. Perfect for your morning commute or coffee break. Stay informed without the fluff. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and join our professional community on LinkedIn. Today, we are diving into a range of critical international trade stories. We'll discuss BIS fines for export violations, the controversial recruitment of African soldiers by Russia, a resolution to the recent Dockworkers strike, ongoing Houthi attacks in the Red Sea, and an update on the status of several deposed African presidents. Let's get started. Starting with our first story, the Bureau of Industry and Security has taken action against First Call International, a Texas-based defense and aerospace provider, for serious export control violations. The company was fined $439,992, with most of the penalties suspended due to financial constraints. Under a settlement agreement, First Call will pay $75,000 and commit to providing export control compliance training to its employees over a one-year probationary period. The violations primarily involved First Call's failure to comply with License Exception Strategic Trade Authorization, or STAY. This exception allows certain exports to trusted U.S. allies, but requires specific certifications from foreign importers. First Call was found to have exported controlled items without obtaining the necessary prior consignee statement, and later falsified documentation to cover up this oversight. In one instance, the company exported secondary flight displays containing controlled components to the UK without proper authorization. When questioned by BIS, First Call provided a backdated consignee statement in an attempt to show compliance. The agency also cited First Call for illegally exporting military aircraft parts to Malaysia and South Korea without required licenses. These shipments included components for FA-18 fighter jets and helicopter parts, which were sent to destinations ineligible for license exception stay. BIS Assistant Secretary Matthew Axelrod emphasized that the agency will not tolerate exporters undermining the integrity of the export control system through false or misleading information. This case underscores the critical importance of robust training and effective compliance programs for companies engaged in international defense and aerospace trade. The relatively lenient financial penalty, given the company's financial situation, is balanced by the mandatory compliance measures. This approach aims to correct behavior and prevent future violations while allowing the business to continue operating under close scrutiny. Moving on to our next segment, Russia has been actively recruiting African soldiers to fight in Ukraine, employing various tactics to attract recruits from across the continent. These efforts have targeted students, prisoners, and even migrants already in Russia, with promises of high salaries, Russian citizenship, and other benefits. Many African students in Russia have reported intense pressure to enlist, with some universities threatening to revoke scholarships or increase tuition fees for those who refuse. Recruiters have set up offices in major migrant reception centers where they often threaten deportation or imprisonment to coerce individuals into signing military service contracts. The Russian government has also authorized the recruitment of soldiers from its prisons, including foreign inmates. This initiative offers prisoners the chance to have their sentences reduced or erased in exchange for military service. While the promised benefits may seem attractive, the reality for African soldiers on the Ukrainian front is often grim. Many recruits receive minimal training before being sent into combat, sometimes as little as 1 month. They are frequently used as cannon fodder, sent on dangerous missions to reveal enemy positions or recover bodies from the battlefield. Deserters face severe consequences, including execution or brutal punishments like having their feet smashed with sledgehammers. Despite these risks, some African soldiers have managed to escape and are now seeking asylum in other countries. The recruitment of African soldiers has raised concerns about exploitation and the use of vulnerable populations in armed conflicts, It also highlights the complex geopolitical dynamics at play in the Ukraine war, with implications reaching far beyond Eastern Europe. Up next, in a significant development for international trade, East and Gulf Coast dockworkers have reached a tentative agreement to suspend their strike until January 15th. This deal, struck between the International Longshoremen's Association and the United States Maritime Alliance, brings temporary relief to 14 ports that had been shut down since Tuesday. The agreement includes a substantial 61.5% wage increase over the next 6 years, addressing one of the key demands of the workers. Additionally, the deal incorporates language to protect workers from automation, a critical concern in an increasingly technology-driven industry. This resolution comes as welcome news for the Biden administration, which had been facing pressure to intervene, but preferred to allow the collective bargaining process to play out. The White House's behind-the-scenes efforts, involving officials from various departments, seem to have contributed to this positive outcome. The temporary suspension of the strike removes a significant threat to supply chains and potential inflationary pressures. However, it's important to note that this is not a final resolution. The parties will return to the negotiating table to address other outstanding issues before the January 15th deadline. For now, operations at affected ports are expected to resume, alleviating concerns about potential shortages and economic impacts. This development underscores the ongoing importance of labor negotiations in maintaining the smooth flow of international trade. In our next news, Iran-backed Houthi rebels have escalated their attacks on commercial vessels in the southern Red Sea, a critical maritime choke point. This week, dramatic footage emerged showing the Panama-flagged tanker MT Cordelia Moon being struck by an unmanned surface vessel operated by the Houthis. The attack occurred on October 1st, involving multiple missile strikes before the unmanned vessel hit. While the Cordelia Moon sustained damage, all crew members are reportedly safe, and the ship is proceeding to its next port. This incident is part of a broader pattern, with Houthi rebels launching over 80 attacks on commercial ships in the region over the past year. These attacks have resulted in 2 ships sinking and 4 sailors losing their lives. The ongoing threat is causing major supply chain disruptions as shipping companies reroute vessels around the Cape of Good Hope to avoid the dangerous Red Sea passage. This rerouting is leading to congestion at major ports like Singapore, where an extraordinary number of ships have congregated due to the disruption. Maritime experts warn that vessels with Israeli, US, or UK affiliations are at highest risk of Houthi attacks. However, any ships within company structures identified as making port calls to Israel are also potential targets. The situation highlights the intersection of geopolitics and global commerce, posing significant challenges for international trade and maritime security in this strategically important region. In our final story today, we take a look at the current situations of several deposed African presidents. These once powerful leaders have faced dramatically different fates since losing power. In Gabon, Ali Bongo Ondimba was ousted in August 2023 after 14 years in power. He's currently under house arrest, refusing to leave the country until his wife and son are released. Niger's Mohamed Bazoum, removed from office in July 2023, remains imprisoned by the military junta. He faces charges of high treason and has had his assets frozen. Burkina Faso has seen 2 recent leadership changes. Rochmark Christian Kabore, deposed in January 2022, is reportedly confined to his villa in Ouagadougou. His successor, Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, lasted only 8 months before being overthrown himself. Damiba now lives under house arrest in Togo. Alpha Condé of Guinea, ousted in 2021, initially went into exile in Turkey. He recently announced he's now somewhere in Africa, though his exact location remains unclear. In Sudan, Omar al-Bashir has been imprisoned since his 2019 removal. The 80-year-old former leader was recently hospitalized and still faces an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court. Other notable cases include Yahya Jammeh of the Gambia, living in exile in Equatorial Guinea since 2017, and Blaise Compaoré of Burkina Faso, who fled to Côte d'Ivoire in 2014 and was later sentenced in absentia to life in prison for his role in Thomas Sankara's assassination. These cases highlight the often tumultuous nature of political transitions in parts of Africa, with former leaders facing a range of consequences from imprisonment to exile. Thanks for tuning in to International Trade Minute, We hope you found today's episode insightful and useful for your practice. Remember, our podcast is brought to you by Rydell Law Firm, your trusted partner in navigating international trade law. Don't miss our next episode. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Stay connected and continue the conversation with us on LinkedIn. Until next time, stay informed and stay ahead.